Okay, hi everyone. My name is Dougal Lamont. I'm leader of the Manitoba Liberal Party. I just want to start by recognizing that we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory, the ancestral homelands of the Anishinaabe and the Cree and Dakota peoples, and the homeland birthplace of the Métis Nation. What we're talking about today is the fact that we are renewing our call for an inquiry into some very serious allegations of harassment and worse, and intimidation and cover-ups of some very serious actions in a number of unions in Manitoba. This is something that we've heard about there have been a number of incidents over the years, but it has really been crystallized by the fact that in January of this year, the president of CUPE Manitoba was arrested on a charge of sexual assault, for which he had previously been exonerated by his own union. There was an internal investigation at CUPE Manitoba, which exonerated Mr. Araya, who's the president of CUPE, and despite that exoneration, the Brandon police found that there was enough evidence for him to be charged with sexual assault. The thing that is disturbing about this is that this is one of many, many instances of very serious allegations, including and up to criminal allegations, where when people are looking to disclose or go to the police, they're discouraged and intimidated. When people speak up and try to do the right thing and grieve when they've been wronged, the response is retaliation, and they may very much lose their jobs. We initially made a request of the government of Manitoba. We actually called on all parties to be part of this. We called on the NDP and the PCs, together with the Manitoba Liberals, to have an all-party agreement to call for a public inquiry, because the individuals that we've spoken to are profoundly concerned about the intimidation that they've faced. They don't feel safe coming forward. They have not been able to feel safe coming forward because there is a pattern of intimidation, abuse, where people have lost their jobs and worse. So just to be clear, after we made this initial call on May 6th, a number of individuals and groups reached out to us, thanking us and pleading with us to make sure that this inquiry goes forward. The reason we've asked the government of Manitoba to call an independent public judicial inquiry is for the following reasons. One, there are extremely serious multiple allegations that people are being discouraged or punished even for reporting crimes to the police. We do have cases of workplace harassment and workplace harassment issues which then spiral out of control, because when somebody tries to put in a complaint over something minor, there's a massive retaliation against them. There are multiple allegations of retaliation in response to people reporting crimes being committed, including sexual assaults. And these are issues that are above and beyond anything that human resources can handle. The complainants have been punished and faced real harm for doing the right thing. So when complainants sought justice and made a complaint through the existing due process, internal investigations into their allegations were botched. They could face threats, intimidation, and retaliation, either just for speaking up or filing the complaint, and they suffered real personal harm, personal financial losses, job losses, careers being derailed and destroyed, as well as mental injuries, including burnout, trauma, and PTSD. Because allegations are being covered up and whistleblowers face retaliation, there are virtually no other avenues for appeal for these women and these workers. It is common for whistleblowers to be targeted for retaliation, even when they are in the right. They've been denied other avenues of appeal, or they lack the resources to hire lawyers that would actually allow them to pursue justice. If the Manitoba government does not act, and if we continue to turn a blind eye to these harassment complaints, we are failing complainants and we are rewarding wrongdoing. Now, we do want to make it absolutely clear, we don't believe that this is an issue that occurs in every union. This is not an attack on the labor movement. but there is a very serious problem within the labor movement, within certain unions, and with certain individuals of a pattern of where when people try to seek justice within their workplace, when they've been wronged within their workplace, they're punished for doing that instead of the person doing wrong facing consequences. But, and we want to make this clear, the problem is not necessarily widespread in that it is not everywhere, but where it does exist, it is entrenched. Patterns of abuse and harassment are usually seen as a deviation from the normal way of operating, but as we see it, we're dealing with the opposite. We're dealing with a culture where, in limited cases, rule violations, harassment, and suppression of complaints has become the norm. Because sweeping these incidents under the rug has always worked in the past. The perpetrators have escaped consequences and accountability, and they go on to success unscathed, while the people they have mistreated are the ones who suffer. This is fundamentally wrong, not just as a matter of justice. This is fundamentally wrong because this is everything that unions are supposed to stand against. Ultimately, unions are about protecting workers. And if they're not protecting workers, we've got a very, very serious problem because no one else, except the Manitoba Liberals, will stand up and defend them. This cannot be allowed to stand. It is not just about the past and of confirmed cases, because we've heard that there are dozens of cases across multiple unions for more than a decade. So this is an ongoing problem where when someone files a complaint, the person, again, the investigation is botched. They're discouraged in the first place from ever filing a complaint at all. And if they do, they face intimidation, harassment, and even being socially isolated. This is what happens to people who are whistleblowers. But whistleblowers only become whistleblowers in an environment where things are broken. And then we're saying part of it is that the system, when it comes to workers reporting harassment, abuse, and even going so far as sexual assaults and crimes within the labor movement, are not able to get justice. And the only avenue for justice the only venue for justice is going to be through a public inquiry. We had initially considered having a legislative committee look at this, but we don't want this to be a partisan circus. That'll be the result if we do that. In our view, an independent judicial inquiry is the only venue for justice to be done and for people to be held to account and to spur the reform that is necessary to establish new effective processes for handling these incidents. And again, we've heard from a number of different individuals. We've heard both independently who approached us over this, as well as organizations who want to see this move forward, because the only place that people will be able to talk in a way that is safe is through a judicial inquiry, because right now people are being intimidated into silence. And the result is that abusers are allowed to prevail. This is not something that should be tolerated. It shouldn't be tolerated in society. It shouldn't be tolerated in a workplace. It's unacceptable. But there is only one way ultimately that we can actually deal with this, and that's through a public inquiry. So what I want to do is I want to thank Sherlynn Delaney, because she's one of the people who's experienced this. She has been standing alone in trying to achieve this. She's been fighting on her own because she's endured this. But she's one of the individuals, one of many individuals who has reached out to us, and she's someone who is supporting our call for a public inquiry. So Sherlynn, if you're on the line, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, it looks like Sherlynn is just on mute.
Okay.
So. There we go. Sherlynn.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, you are good.
Okay, sorry about that. Unfortunately, my power went out, so I'm not able to join you virtually other than on my phone. So please bear with me. I am Sherlynn Delaney, a proud First Nation Indigenous woman. I dedicated my life caring for others, 28 years to be exact, at times in the most challenging circumstances in the course of working in the healthcare field. I have experienced and been subjected to discrimination, bullying, and harassment in the workplace. One of many particular incidents prompted me to file a respectful workplace complaint against my boss, essentially my superior. After viewing a family photo of my family members wearing ugly Christmas sweaters, she pointed to an older gentleman in the picture asking, "Who's that guy?" When I replied it was my ex-husband, she remarked, "He's white. Why is he white? Why isn't he Aboriginal? I thought you'd be married to an Aboriginal." I was shocked and stunned into silence, unsure of how to reply. Further, I was deeply offended by the disrespectful remark and viewed it as an attack on me, an attack on my family, and an attack on my ancestry. An investigation took place. The investigation itself was fatally flawed from the onset. The individuals tasked to conduct an investigation were subordinates of the boss, which creates an irreconcilable conflict of interest. Going forward on principle and accountability, I filed labor board complaints and human rights complaints. My labor board complaint is before the labor board, and my human rights complaints are pending. Ultimately, I was terminated as reprisal and in retaliation of filing a complaint. I am unrepresented before the labor board. Unfortunately, my situation is not unique. There are many others who have experienced the same and/or similar scenarios. Access to justice is a critical element for complainants facing barriers throughout the entire process. In my experience, there is no right door. I fully support a full inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherlynn. So at this point, I can open it up to questions for anybody that has any questions. If you could just either type your question into the chat or raise your hand, and I'll allow you to turn your mic on. Hey, Laura, you can go ahead. I've just turned your mic on.
Hi, thank you. It's Laura. I would like to know if the judicial inquiry would hopefully look at the illegal non-disclosure agreements that are being issued, being extorted, really. I had to sign mine in order to obtain a reference because I had been fired after filing a right to refuse unsafe work. And while on medical leave for the injuries that the WRHA caused. And so again, I'd like to know about a bit more about the crimes they're thinking of following up on, and I feel that extorted NDAs is one of the big ones.
Yeah, if I can, this is actually exactly why we need to have an inquiry. What we've heard is that essentially people are being pressured and intimidated into signing non-disclosure agreements and being paid some kind of hush money effectively, though it is often no substitute for everything they've lost. They're essentially being told to go away, and they are forced to sign non-disclosure agreements, which means they can't talk about what happened. This is there's a pattern of doing this. If we have an inquiry as we understand it, any court of competent jurisdiction means that people can actually speak freely. And it is incredibly important to speak freely because what we've heard when we talk about the different allegations, we've heard allegations of within the workplace of people being pressured into having sexual relationships with the people overseeing them at work, being forced into that for fear of losing their job, sexual assaults, and other crimes. I mean, we recognize how serious harassment within the workplace is, racism, discrimination, and sexism, but there is an entire spectrum of activities that are going on, including the fact that when people speak up for themselves and ask for rules to be followed, whether they are rules around harassment, rules around safety, or rules around criminal behavior, that when they go and try to disclose it through the proper channels, no one listens. And we've seen this. This is extremely concerning because we've seen it in individual unions when people make complaints and they go all the way up to the Canadian Labour Congress, whether they go through the NDP, they have not been able to get answers and they have not been able to get justice. Now, I know that Bia Bruska, I believe her name is Bruski, was just elected the new leader of the Canadian Labour Congress. She's from Winnipeg. I certainly hope that she would support this call for an inquiry, because ultimately, what we've seen over the years is that this is happening, that it is chronic, it is entrenched, and that unless it comes to light, it is not going to change. It is incredibly disturbing what's been going on because we have multiple instances of extremely serious incidents where when people speak up, they are silenced. They're silenced, intimidated, and they're forced to keep a secret by being forced to sign an NDA, essentially for the rest of their lives, at the risk of losing everything. And that is essentially covering up. Essentially, we have a system where people are being forced to cover up what has injured them. It's not acceptable. And I'm happy that Sherlynn has stepped forward, because she's just one example where her initial claim could have been dealt with in a way that was fair, in a way that would have improved the situation at work. But instead, she lost her job and she was targeted. And she is not alone. And that is one of the most important things I have to say, is that we are talking about dozens and dozens of individuals over years who face this. It's wide, it is entrenched, and it is happening as a part of the culture of certain unions. And if we do not act, it will not change. And Sherlynn and others will not see justice. And we all have an obligation, as not just as MLAs, but as citizens, we should all want to see justice done, because what is happening is not acceptable.